On the air.
Welcome back to another exciting week of Life Unscripted, and I am so excited about our guest. Janie, how are you on your side of the world?
I am doing fantastic as we enter this month of December. I cannot believe we are almost in 2019.
Absolutely, and look at this, a very Merry Christmas present. Guess where we're traveling today, Janie?
We are traveling across the globe.
To Australia. This is what's beautiful about technology, about connectivity that brings global citizens and, the same heart-minded, focused individuals together. So tonight we have such an amazing, incredible life journey story to feature on Life Unscripted. So without further ado, I would love to introduce to our listeners, to our viewers, none other than Brett Jones. So who exactly is Brett Jones? All the way from Perth, Australia. Well, Brett founded a $400 million company in his early 20s, Janie, early 20s, and transformed it into a real estate behemoth, and then lost it all in his 30s. But with true entrepreneurial spirit, he regained it in his 30s, as well as going on a personal spiritual journey to find out what this life is really all about. So he has traveled the world, including a 3-year sail across the ocean. I'm going to have so much fun with this podcast. 3-year sail across the oceans in search of what the answer is, and now runs Relationship Warriors to restore marriages and shows entrepreneurs just how to have it all across marriage, children, investments, wealth, sex, and inner peace. So why are we only having the show for an hour? This is going to be like multi-part. He is the father to 6 children and grandfather to 7, happily married to his beautiful wife, Marie, for 26 years. And to him, this is yet his greatest achievement. He runs 3 multi-million-dollar companies in education, retail, property, an accomplished public speaker and entertainer. He makes a lively and profound guest to be on our podcast show. Janie.
Ladies, thank you so much. It's so great to be here. You gorgeous looking women on the other side of the world. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, I thank you. I thank you. All those things. I'm just wondering, you're like working while we're sleeping.
Well, that's true. That's true, Janie. That's exactly how it works. Exactly. So it's good that we managed to sync the times, right? So, ladies, thank you so much for being here. I love talking about this journey because I think, all our stories, all our journeys are the same. And some journeys perhaps seem, more exciting or different to others, but effectively our lives are the same. And, in my early 20s, I certainly didn't have any idea about, a purpose to life or why I was here. I was just focused on one thing. And then as I became more aware, I sort of became, aware of the reasons why I did what I did in my early 20s. And at that time, I got married at 19 years of age. So I got married very, very young. And that really later, I understood that came out of my own need of experiences that happened to me that made me feel unloved. So I was just looking to find somebody, that would actually love me. So, I found her and I got married at 19. But then the moment that I did, this entrepreneurial drive just kicked into me. I had my first child at 21. I started working for a real estate agency, which was in commercial property that you guys have in America. It's called Colliers. It actually started here in Australia and then expanded around the world. And I became a director of that company by the age of 22. And I just sort of found, what I was good at. And I didn't even realize it at the time, but my dad was a salesman. He actually sold TV sets. When TVs first came out, you actually had the TV delivered to your house. And that's how it sort of began. People wouldn't go to a shop to buy them. He actually went around and delivered them. So he was a salesman. And I think just, through osmosis, I picked up those traits. So I became very, very good at that. And I sold a lot of office leasing space, leased out office space to companies. And then I began selling commercial real estate. But I got transferred to Melbourne. And before I did, something happened that was quite synchronistic. And again, I think, as anyone tells a story, I think in the story there's also these moments where these events happen that are just ideal for us. And I was sent out by my boss to go and look for this file, which was in the storage area, out in the suburbs behind this old beaten up delicatessen, like a small shop. And it was just a garden shed. And I went in there and there was dust and files and stuff everywhere. And I was digging my way through them trying to find this file. And I came across this file that my boss had been involved in. And it was basically that he had found this site on a major highway. And one of our banks called Westpac was looking for a location. So they wanted to go on the site, but he didn't have enough money to develop it. So he went to one of our clients and said, look, I've got the site, I've got the tenant, can you give me the money? And they did a deal. And I'm only like 20 years of age and I'm looking at this and I'm going, wow, that's a really interesting method of making a lot of money very quickly. Then I moved to Melbourne, I get transferred to Melbourne and take my family over there. And, I just rock up at the office and within the first week, I get this letter on my desk from a bank. Guess which bank, right? Exactly the same bank, Westpac, going, we want to move out of central Melbourne. We want to go to these suburban locations. So, I'm probably not the brightest spark on the planet, but I connected the dots, right? I go, hang on, maybe I could find a site. So I ring this client that I know back in Perth and go, look, I've got this letter. I'm going to go look for sites. Have you got any money? Now, I didn't know it. He didn't actually have any money, but he knew this guy in Germany that was worth $80 million. So I found the site, put it to Westpac. They said, yes, we want to lease it for 10 years. My mate calls the guy in Germany and literally within 2 weeks, I've got $350,000 transferred into my bank account.
Wow.
And I'm like 22 years of age at this point. And so we get Westpac to lease the new building. We construct the new building. And I'd never constructed a building before, but I figured it out, how to do a building contract, and I worked that out. And I had never worked with an architect before, but I worked that out. And a bit over a year later, we'd sold the building before we even finished it. And I personally made $380,000.
And you were 22.
Convert that, and this is back in about 1985.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you convert those dollars, that's about $800,000 now. Mm-hmm. So this is my very first real estate deal, right? And I'm just 22 years of age and just made $800,000. So I'm obviously, my ego's starting to expand. I'm thinking I'm bulletproof. And we roll on to do the next deal. And the German guy transfers $2 million into my bank account. And we buy the site near the Parliament House in central Melbourne. And I go to Westpac and go, will you finance it? And they lend me with no personal guarantees, right, which in real estate terms is just unheard of. They lend me $14 million and I'm just 23 years of age. So we go ahead and develop this building, which is now going to cost $16 million, $2 million from Ensman, 14 from the bank. And as we start to construct it, it's October 1987, and October 1987 was the day the stock market crashed, and literally on that day was the day the tender for the building closed, and an insurance company bought it from us on that day. The stock market fell 40-odd% on that one day. And we made $6 million, so I made $2 million personally, which converted now, we're talking like around $4 to $5 million. So very quickly, I've gone from, just working for a real estate company to now quitting, starting up my own development company. Then I found a Japanese company called Hazama. They financed the next building, which was $30 million. And within 2 years, I had $400 million worth of developments under construction. Gone from, and simply because I found one method, one way of making money. Fast forward another 5 years. I'm now in my 30s. I now have 4 children. And, I'm worth over $100 million. We've got all these developments going on around the country. And then the real estate market comes to a grinding halt. Came to a halt in America with the savings and loan a few years before that, but it finally caught up in Australia. And we're madly scrambling to try and hold things together, and weren't able to. The company collapses, and it exposes the reality of my marriage, which was not good. The relationship wasn't good. I was too busy at work. She was too focused on the kids. And when the money went, not all of it went, but a lot of it, most of it went, it really exposed, where the relationship was at. So the marriage collapsed. And literally, I lost it all. My ex-wife got the farm that we owned. And I really just started again, literally, with $7,000. And I used that $7,000 to buy this old beat-up Ford car, which had a bench seat and the gears were on the driving column. That's how old the car was. And the car I had previous to that was a convertible Porsche 911. So I've gone from that to driving around in this big old car with a bench seat, big enough to fit my 4 kids in it. And hopefully with one spare seat, hopefully for some lady that I'm going to meet, that I can fit in there with the 4 kids. And I don't know why my wife, Marie, right, decided to date me, but she did, God bless her. So at that time, I think when anyone goes through something like that, certainly for me, it made me question everything. Mm-hmm. You lose everything. It makes you question everything. It's just like, what is this life really about? I thought it was about having it all. I thought it was about having all this stuff and, going to these important parties and flying in private jets and, mixing with billionaires. And I thought that's what life was. If I had that, then not only am I going to be famous and, have everything, but people are going to like me. They're going to respect me and love me. That was really what I thought was going to happen. And none of that happened, of course. I remember being at, so in Perth, the suburb to be in is called Peppermint Grove. It's on near the river, and it's the most exclusive suburb. And I remember standing at the Peppermint Grove Tennis Club, playing tennis with 3 other guys. And I just had this feeling, this thought, and it just occurred to me, it's just like, wow, if I didn't have all this money and I wasn't who I am, I've created myself to be, these guys wouldn't play tennis with me at all. So when I lost it all, I was desperate to save my marriage. And a friend of mine suggested I go and do this personal development course that she'd just done. And at that point, I was so desperate to try and save it, I just went, yeah, definitely, I'm in for it. My ex-wife wasn't. She wouldn't go. But I thought, look, I'm going to go and maybe, I'll change enough or I'll find something there that'll save the marriage. So I went and I got a complete surprise. Like I walked in and I thought, okay, it actually ended up being in this abandoned monastery about 2 hours drive from Perth, right out in the country. And then it didn't normally hold it there, but for various reasons, the other venue wasn't available. So I'm driving out, in the middle of nowhere. I rock up at this place. There's no one around. And I'm a bit nervous, as you are when you go to these things. And I walk in. And I'm quite relieved. There's a whiteboard there and a pad and a pen. And it looks very businesslike. And I sit down, and by the end of the first night, my jaw's sort of on the table. It's just like, oh my God. And I got to see life in a different way. You might call it a spiritual experience, Melody and Janine, Janie. You know, just something happened in that weekend that really stripped away everything that I thought life was to really seeing people particularly. Because when you really think about it, life is us.
Mm-hmm.
Life is people. And I got to see people in a different way. And I got to see myself in a different way, stripped of all the things that I'd made myself. It just came back to like, who is Brett? Who is this guy? And what does he really want in life? So that really started me on this journey of really questioning everything, questioning our social system, questioning our education system, questioning our food system, questioning our wealth system, right? And as I went more into that journey, I started reading more and more books. You know, I started reading things like the Bhagavad Gita, the ancient Hindu text, and I read the Bible from beginning to end. And I read The Power of Now, and I read The Mystic Art of Cosmic Consciousness. And I read, you know, literally thousands of these books around spirituality. Mm-hmm. And I became so fascinated with it that I actually started working with the company that did the personal development seminar. And then I met Marie.
That is just one journey. There's, you know, as a psychotherapist, Brett, there's a couple of things that you said that I just want to extract, and hoping that you can expand on and to help some of our listeners. You know, for one, at such an early age, you were in such this position that most people can't even imagine. And you said something when you got to that place of that first deal. You said you had to figure it out. So when you think back to that 21-year-old or that early 20s, when you think about that person that you were now and all the things that you learned on the journey to who you are, to the guy, to the man that we are speaking at this moment, what would you go back and tell that 20-something-year-old self that was just coming into his own, that was figuring out who he was, his identity development was in the making at that point, and there were some pivotal things that you learned. So what would you tell him? What would you do different?
I'd say to him, you know, it's certainly have the money. You know, that's important, but that's just one small piece of life. So, you know, what we do in Relationship Warriors now is we talk about having a kingdom. We talk about different territories within the kingdom. And, you know, one of those territories is what I call the temple. And the temple is really around, you know, who we are, how we relate to the world and how we see the world, and understanding that we're all conditioned by three main things: by events that have happened to us, by the culture that we live in, and by role models around us. And realizing, you know, if I was talking to Brett now, I'd say realize that at the moment you're being driven by your ego. You're being driven by a need that's been conditioned into you. And there's nothing wrong with having the money, but you need to have the money for the right reason, Brett. And if you're coming from the right place, if your intention is right, then you'll be working with the force within this universe that I call the divine, as compared to the other force, which is the ego. I mean, you only need to look around you. There are two forces, clearly, right? One that creates and builds and grows things, and the other force, clearly, in nature, that destroys. And we're part of that. We're not separate to it. We can't be separate to it. We're in this universe. And, you know, when you go back to things, you know, like the Tao Te Ching, and it just explains that very clearly. There are two forces, light and dark, warm and cold, men and women, masculine and feminine. It's all there. And we're part of that. So I was coming from the ego, and I built it from the ego, as many people do. But if you do that, Brett, there's only one result from that. There can be only one result if you're using your ego to create the strategy to actually build something. Because the ego strategy always ends up in destruction. Always. There are no exceptions to that rule and that law in life. So I make myself aware about that, and I'd say to myself, like, start to investigate this. Start to learn about these laws that are applying this universe. You might not know them, you might not like them, you might not care about them, but they apply.
So basically really helping him be at this higher level of self-awareness to understand his motives and that good old why. Why is he doing the things that he's doing and what is driving him? And
Absolutely.
that is just so, so good. And you mentioned when you were at that bottom and lost everything, that you questioned everything. And sometimes when we look at people in the middle of that breakdown, they can't see, you know, the future, and they get to that place of hopelessness, and there's only one way up from there, and you got to do something. So when you look back at that pivotal moment, what would you say were those motivations that helped you climb out of that hole to realize, you know what, that there's something else and something better out there, and that you became a better person because of it?
Look, you know, I don't call myself a religious person now. I certainly call myself a spiritual person in that, you know, I've always sought, I guess, the reason behind, you know, why we're here and why do we live and why does the universe exist and all those sort of bigger questions. But I think having been brought up a Catholic, that gave me at least a base. It gave me some belief system to hold on to. And I think, you know, for all of us, having a belief system, one of the things I questioned, Janie, is, you know, what is it that I believe and why do I believe it? So I went away from the Catholic religion. As I looked into it more and I began to understand historically how it was formed and the fact that, you know, certain gospels were cut out of the Bible and the whole tradition of the Catholic Church and how what we currently have was formed, I started to realize, okay, I need to question things. I need to ask myself, why am I adopting this belief system? And does this belief system that I have, is it beneficial to me and beneficial to other people? So that became my own personal yardstick as to what I accepted and didn't accept. And at that point, it was like, okay, I've got two choices here. I can take the down road and become depressed and suicidal. And like everybody, I think, you know, in our lives, at some point we hear that voice in our head. And we can either follow that voice or we can start to separate from that voice. Mm-hmm. And I wrote a book called Awaken. And one of the things I said in that book is that all thoughts come from the ego. All thought comes from the ego. Anything we hear in our head is egoic in nature and based. And then, you know, what I learned in that period when I did that personal development seminar was we operate at two levels. We operate at the head level, but we also operate at the heart level. Mm. So I started to listen to my heart, Janie, and my heart led me in a different direction. My heart led me on that upward path of, you can make it about you, but as I did that seminar, that's why I was so transformative. It stopped being about me. It became about learning for other people. So as I learned, I wanted to share it. And I think that, you know, the Course in Miracles says you teach what you need to learn. Mm. You teach what you need to learn. So as you teach it, it becomes more real to you. And that was certainly a big piece in my journey going through that.
So, Brett, a few more things here, because you are definitely sharing a lot of deep wisdom, you know, the ego, the heart versus the head, right? Where ego takes the pedestal, and when you remove that, you know, the one thing that Janie and I have discovered in our interview process or the podcast process is that the deepest pain does become the catalyst to your purpose. So you went through a divorce, you had all the money in the world, but you weren't feeling fulfilled or happy because you lost what was pivotal, which is the family unit in the process. You went through a period of lack only to then become positioned into now a purpose-filled life of trying to save 1 million marriages. So let's go into that, because you have a set number, 1 million marriages. And the fact that you value relationships, because you found that this is the heartbeat, right? So whether in any type of context of spirituality, it's a family unit that you know, it's always been not just be walking in this path of just being alone, but the family unit. Let's talk about why the 1 million, targeted number for marriages. And then we're going to flip the switch here and also address our audience who's looking for the one. Because part of your website promoted about the one, right? So we have the marriages, and then we have single women like myself and Janie with the ever curiosity of going, how do you find the one? So let's talk about the 1 million. Why 1 million?
Sure. So maybe pick up the story, if you let me, at where I met Marie.
Yes.
So I'd just done the personal development seminar. Marie had done it. We'd done it separately. And they had a follow-up program, and we met doing that program. So we just started out as friends, and I actually had lost my driving license. In Australia, probably similar to the US, when you speed too much, you get a certain number of points, and then you lose your license. Well, I'd lost my license. But the group that I was involved with had weekly meetings to go to. And Marie lived near me, so she came and picked me up and would give me a drive, a lift to the meetings. And we became good friends, over a period of a year to 18 months. And then the relationship changed. We became romantically involved. And as I went further into that journey of, spiritual development, helping other people, I got to see that, like, these different areas. So we've got the temple, we've got spiritual, we've got the treasury, which is our wealth area. We've got the relationship code. So the relationship area, we've got the kids, we've got the bedroom, right? Really important area. So we've got these different areas or territories, as we call them, of the kingdom. And in each different area, there are skills that we need. So I had to go on a journey to find the skills spiritually. But I also had to go on the journey, Melody, to find the skills in relationship. I thought I knew how to do relationships. But as I started to learn more about how we're conditioned, so those 3 areas I spoke about, culture, role models, and events. So with the culture, what I discovered is that back in World War I and World War II, there was a major demographic shift, huge, that really most common media is not even talking about, or perhaps even not even aware of, which is part of our mission to share this message. And that is that we had a divorce rate back then in America, in Australia, and most Western countries of around 10%. So divorce was there. It's not like it was prohibited or even culturally not acceptable. You got divorced. But after World War I and II, it jumped to 40%. And then kept going up. And then when we got to the 60s, it shifted again. Now, what's happened is the divorce rate's falling, right? But people aren't even getting married anymore. So your generation, they're going, I don't want to get married. I'm just going to live together. So that proportion of the population is actually significantly increasing. So they're making a choice not to get married because marriage has such a bad rap. The reason it's got such a bad rap is that after World War I and World War II, some major things happened. 70% of the men went to war. So you can imagine, right, in America, 70% of men disappear. All that's left is kids, and men who are like 60, 65, 70 plus. The rest are off at war. Now at home, all the women are having to step up. They're not only just looking after the kids, they're looking after the family, they're looking after their mother and father, they're looking after his mother and father. They're going to the factories and they're building the war machine. They're building the tanks, they're building the equipment, they're building the bombs, they're building the rifles, they're doing it all. Men, when they're at war, are having these horrific experiences, bonding in a battalion, bonding in a platoon of men. And suddenly the guy you become really close to disappears in a spray and mist of blood next to you. And you have to deal with that. You have to come home after that, sit at the dinner table and try and be normal. They came back different. They came back changed. They came back broken. They came back wanting peace. So now culturally, around the world, we've got this conditioning going on. And then my generation, their kids, modeled that behavior. No longer was the masculine present.
Mm-hmm.
Men had changed. They were looking to be taken care of. Meanwhile, women had stepped up into the masculine, doing everything and being everything for everybody. And I talk to women all around the world now, in America, here, the UK, and without exception, they're all telling me, I feel exhausted. I'm tired. I'm just tired of emotionally carrying everything. When we got to the 60s, it shifted again because women became equal, and rightfully so. Anything you ladies can do, I can do, and vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. But culturally, what we said is we're the same. And we ain't the same. Like, we are totally different. I mean, just brain-wise, structure-wise, the connection between your left and right hemisphere is twice the size of mine. You exchange information, your brain activity, your blood flow to certain areas of the brain is twice mine. You have 5 language centers. On average, you use 28,000 words per day. I use 7. And that's on a really good day.
Wow.
So these differences between us, culturally, we said we're the same. So now when John Gottman, professor out of San Francisco, did a study back in 2000, and he studied 3,500 couples. He videotaped them. And what he clearly saw in that study was there were 2 markers that he called, that he was looking for in those conversations. And with a 91% degree of accuracy, he could predict whether those couples were still together 5 years later. And what he clearly saw is that men now have been cultured into blocking. So she comes to him and she starts giving him the state of the kingdom. There's this wrong. We're not doing this. You need to be doing this. This needs to happen with the kids. You're not listening to me. See, I know that when you ladies are looking at me, you're actually reading the micro movements on my face, something that men don't do. We do exactly the opposite. When a man looks at another person, we look at the periphery first, and then we slowly move to the face. Women do it exactly in reverse. They look at the face first and then go to the periphery. And you can look in a guy's eyes, and you can confirm this, right? Mm-hmm. You can tell in an instant whether he is thinking about something else besides you. True or false?
True.
Yeah. And every woman around the planet, when I ask that question, confirms it. Guys have got no idea you do that. So they're talking to you and they're thinking about other stuff. They're thinking about work and sports and God knows what, right? And they're looking you in the eye trying to have this conversation. And then when you go, we need to talk, every man, without exception, his knees bang together in fear. Because what he's expecting next is where he's screwed up. Mm-hmm. Because so many women now have moved to the masculine state and they're coming from that place and they've been conditioned into doing that. Whereas men aren't even aware they're in, I don't even like using the word feminine because most guys won't recognize they're in that place. Mm-hmm. I call it prince. They're not a king. They're in prince. All right? Mm-hmm. And they're not ready to step up into king. They're not ready to create a kingdom. They're not ready to settle down. And even if they do get married, they still act like a prince. Mm-hmm. And as single ladies, you know what I'm talking about with that, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. The guys you've gone out with are princes. They want to go out. They want to still have a good time. They want to hang with the boys, hang with the bros, have a good time, do all this stuff, and they're not ready to step up and commit. Why? Because we've been cultured and conditioned into it. And we have to recognize and we have to learn the differences. So in the journey, to answer your question, Melody, that I went on, why a million marriages? Because the social devastation that is being caused by the level of divorce and relationship breakup that we have has to stop. I've done too much work with too many people to see the devastation that divorce causes. Mm-hmm. I talk to adults, men and women in their 30s, and the pain they've experienced from watching what their parents did to each other,
Right.
it's not good. It's not good. And then it makes it so hard for them to learn and form these patterns, these conditionings, this way of communication that I had to learn with Marie. You know, I had to learn how to communicate with her. I had to redefine her communication with me, because literally I still feel it when she comes to me and she goes, we need to talk. I'm like, really? Do we need to talk? Yeah, we need to talk. So I actually set my life up for success. You know, I take her out on a date night every week. We have 2 half-hour periods every week where we sit down and just talk. And as a woman, you know, she loves it. And I joke with the guys when they come to my event, I say, you know, you've paid all this money to come here. Well, what I'm about to give you is worth every single dollar of what you paid. So when she starts talking to you, what you need to say to her is, tell me more.
Simple as
Tell me more.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling? Tell me more how you feel about that. Because for a woman to do that, when she can actually open up to a man, it is about opening up. And when she can fully express herself, when she can fully get all those words out, 2 amazing things happen. One is she feels open. And she feels connected. And she feels connected because literally as she talks, her levels of oxytocin, the connector hormone, are actually rising. And as he steps into that place of presence, of being focused, which is what men can do really, really well when they choose to. When he can give her that presence, when he can step into the masculine and be present for her, like totally there for her, not for anything else, just there for her, his levels of testosterone increase. And she can feel that. Because as women, you know what I'm talking about, right? You know when he's present and you know when he's not. And you know what it feels like to have a man present for you. True?
True. So my question to you before I kick this off to Janie is this. For single ladies out there, right? We are now in the world, and I'm not a fan of it, nor am I a participant in it, of online dating. You've got apps, you've got Tinder, you got, you know, Bumble and all this other things. And to me, for me personally, it removes that organic courtship that was so treasured back in the days. And it's now come down to, you know, swipe up left and right and just mindless dating. What is your piece of advice for single women to have that quality men that you talked about? I know that we have to do our inner workings as well, right? Because we all have our breakdowns to breakthroughs. And before you can even maturely get into a relationship, you have to identify your own sources of, you know, of past tragedies so that they're not triggered at the time that you're dating. So there's not this transference of emotional baggage from past relationships. So
Totally.
what would be your 2 pieces of advice for single ladies that are listening? Because I'm pretty sure they're itching to say, okay, but how do we find the one?
Yep. So look for a king. Look for a guy who is prepared to work on himself. If you're going in a relationship, and what I see so many single ladies do is, you know, they go into the relationship and it's almost like, this is pretty good putty here. You know, I can work with this. I can improve this. I can make this guy better. I can make him into a better man, right? And they hope that he's going to step up from prince to king. Stop hoping. Look at him with realism. Look at him and see it with truth. So in Relationship Warriors, we have a code that we live by. And the first of the code is tell the truth. And what we mean by that is see it as it is, ladies. See him as he is right now. Okay, I get that he's got potential, but see it as he is. Is he prepared to work on himself, or is he just constantly blocking, putting it back to you, constantly making excuses why he doesn't show up? They're all clues. Look for that. Those behaviors are going to be there. Look for it. And if he's not prepared to do work on himself, better to make the choice now to end it than be in there for 2 years and then realize he ain't going to change.
And that is all just such relevant information, Brett. Personally and professionally, personally, I've been married for 15 years. And a lot of things that you said were relevant as to the journey of what I've learned about myself in that relationship, and taking some time to really get in relationship with myself. And I see a lot of people make that same mistake. Is there's so many lies told at the altar, so to speak, because we are marrying the potential and the image of who we want that person to be versus the truth of who they really are. And if we can accept them for that day and that moment for the rest of our life, would we still marry them, is always the question I ask. And then you mentioned, someone that was actually trained by John Gottman, just absolutely love his work, and talking about stonewalling and criticism, and all those 4 horsemen are so important in personal relationships. But, also from a lot of people that are listening to our podcast, and for myself, I'm actually a business owner, I have a brick and mortar business with employees. And, one of the things as being a divorcee, a single mom, and building a business over the past 8 years, one of the things that I also struggle with, that a lot of people can relate with, is, can we really have it all? What does success really look like? Having an absolutely, I'm blessed to have my 6-year-old son, have a business, have a social life, and just all the different projects that I'm involved in, and being able to also help some of my clients understand what does success look like in business. And you've given us some principles and some things to think about. So I'm wondering, what are your advice to us business owners, to us that are also coming into relationship and maturity, in that sense, that what does that look like for us? What can we expect?
Yeah. So I think, just to go back on Melody's question for 1 second, one of the principles that we work by, and it's very self-evident when you start to look into it, is we attract what we are, not what we want. So what that means is, if we haven't worked on ourselves on the inside, then we're going to attract that type of person that's actually reflecting back to us those unresolved patterns inside ourselves that we haven't worked on. And as entrepreneurs, the same principle applies. So when I lost it all, I'm, I guess, the poster boy for having had to come back from that and relearn. But I think once you've learnt the principles of business, once you understand what business is, which is really just identifying a need that people have and then making it about them, giving the highest level of service, then it becomes simpler in terms of how to reach those people and what to do to enable your business to grow to the level that you want it to. And can we have it all? Yeah, I think we can, but it's not a question of balance, it's a question of priorities. So people try and balance their life. That's not how you do it. At certain times, you have to set certain priorities. There are times when your business has to come before your son. If you continually do that, you will have a problem with him. If I'm in a relationship with Marie and I continually put my business before her, I'm going to have a problem, right? Equally, if I put her before the business all the time, I'm going to have a problem with my business. So we have to learn to know when the priorities need to be right, need to be not balanced out, but set correctly for different periods in our life. And that's a skill you learn through experience. There are times when I need to sit down here and get stuff done. There are times when I need to switch this off, shut off my phone, and I'm just with the family, with my kids when they come home from school. And I've built a life where I can make those choices. There are times when I travel with them, and I take them with us most of the time. Like when I come to America to do the events, I bring the kids with us, and Marie comes with me as well. So we hold events in Orlando, and we hold them in LA. So they come with us. That life has been built deliberately. That life has been built by choice. So we have a saying again in Relationship Warriors, and we say that 2 is more powerful than 1. So when I work together with Marie, her unique input as a woman into what I do provides a completely different outlook insight, intuition into what I'm doing that I would not bring to it. Equally, with her business, I do the same. And we look after different areas. So that's where working together as a couple, no matter what you're doing, as entrepreneurs particularly, you become more powerful together in a relationship. And that's how it's meant to be. You know, the spiritual purpose, if you want to look at it, of a relationship, is to learn from each other. Marie grew up in Northern Ireland in Belfast during the Troubles, in a very tough environment. She's a very, very powerful and direct lady, let me tell you. So, you know, I cop it direct from her. But I used to be very wishy-washy. I'd try and, you know, sugarcoat everything. Well, one of the skills I've learned from being with Marie is to be very, very direct with people, particularly when I'm coaching them or mentoring them or working with them. And at times that is necessary. Sometimes you want to sugarcoat stuff. At other times you want to be very, very direct. So I've learned that from her. Equally, she's learned from me to put the velvet glove on the iron fist. And that has been a valuable skill for her. So as entrepreneurs, we can learn these different things from each other when we're in a relationship. If you're single and you're trying to handle it all, that is a difficult task. You know, there is no doubt, you know, that I'm sure, Janie, you're finding it like just full on to be able to do that. And I have great admiration for single parents. I mean, I did that for a while between my divorce and meeting Marie, and I know how tough it is to do that. But again, there are skills that we can learn there. There are skills in every area, and we can learn how to do that. We can learn from the best role models that we can find to be able to do that. It's not impossible. We just have to find the people that have been able to perfect that. It's that simple.
It is, and that's why I'm talking to you.
That's why we have them on.
So, you know, another piggyback question as far as business goes. You know, I look at resources and finances as opportunities to grow and to have more impact in whatever you feel like God or the universe is calling you to do. So with those business owners that also follow our podcast and they are now building their business and they're moving forward, how do they get to the millions? What is the lessons that you've learned, Brett, that you can share with our business owners about hacking the system by using and learning from role models like yourself to not repeat some of the same mistakes?
Yeah. Look, you know, you can break it, you can chunk down into, you know, day-to-day things that you need to be doing. And I think that's important. I think you have to structure, well, I don't think, I know you have to structure your life. I've had a unique life in that, you know, I know virtually all the billionaires in Australia. I've mixed with them, you know, I've sat down to dinner with them, I've spoken with them. I work with people at all levels. And there is no doubt that those that reach those levels have a very structured life. And that comes down to things as simple as making your bed. As, you know, I drink a green smoothie every morning. I meditate at least 4 or 5 times a week. I take time out on a Monday to plan my week. What is important to me in this week? What do I need to achieve? But you also then need to chunk up. If you know anything about NLP, you need to chunk up to the bigger level of what's my goal? What's my intent? Not so much a goal, because I hate goals, to be honest with you. You know, I used to be a very big goal-orientated person, but now it's more around intent. What is my intent? What is my intent with my business? So, you know, we have a retail business. We have a multi-level marketing business. We have a property business. We have relationship warriors. We have all these different income sources that we've built. And the principles in building each of them is exactly the same. You need to have an intent. I want to do this for a reason. If your reason is the wrong reason, it won't happen. To be accurate, it will happen and then it will collapse. Because I've seen it numerous times. But when people have the right intent for something, it's amazing what we are capable of. But you have to be driven. There's no way around it. You have to be highly motivated. You have to be able to get yourself out of bed in the morning at 6 o'clock and meditate.
Absolutely. I completely understand that. I was just sharing today, Brett, that, I believe in mentorship. So my mentor, who I'll be meeting with this week, actually has me doing exactly that. So I'm writing out my goals for 2019, and he has me coming up, and I have to share with him the specifics of my why, which is the intent. So
Yes.
I think our viewers and our listeners can really value that we come up with these things, what we want to achieve, but why do we want to achieve it? What's our intent, and what are we hoping to have from that?
Can I share? When I created Relationship Warriors, we created a code to live by. And again, I think it's something that, most of us lack now. We've lost these religious structures pretty much within our culture now. And it comes back to, like I was talking about before, belief systems. So tell the truth. Even when it's painful, even when it's difficult, do the right thing no matter what our thoughts or our emotions tell us. Our thoughts and emotions say, eat the chocolate. They lie to us, right? Our thoughts and emotions say, stay in bed. I don't want to get up. They just lie to us. So do the right thing above thought and emotion. If I want to build the business, I have to get up at 6 o'clock. That's it, right? I don't have a choice. But lastly, on intent and the why, love and protect the family. And even if you're just a family of one, like, love and protect the family. And the moment that I took my intent from creating an empire, what I call an empire, building it from my own ego purposes, oh, look at me, I fly around in private jets and I've got $400 million and all of that, to I'm doing this to create stability, to create a kingdom for my family, my wealth and not just that, but also I extend my family to charities and, giving portion of my income away. So the moment that I did that, my income just started to go nuts. Literally went nuts. The moment my intent was right. And on the back of our shield for Relationship Warriors, we have little symbols, and it comes around those priorities we were talking about before. Myself first, unselfishly. Then my wife, then my kids, then my business, then friends and family in the bigger world. When we get that mixed up, life becomes very mixed up. If I'm in a relationship and I'm still emotionally tied to my mother, right? I got big problems with my wife. Huge. Massive. And again, for the single ladies, there's another clue, right? Nice that he loves his mum. If he's around there 5 times a week for dinner, big problem. Big clue. Don't go near it. Run.
I'm so glad that the ladies are hearing that from you, emotionally enmeshed men that are still stuck at 14.
You got it. You got it. So getting that priority level right, when we put our family, when we get our intent correct, that's, when you're really going to see your business start to kick big time. You've got to do the small stuff. You've got to know the strategies. You've got to know the marketing, all those things, how to reach your customers, who are your people. Your people are my people, right? That's why we're on the podcast together. So knowing that if you're in business, that's essential, and knowing how to talk to them. And how you talk to them is you just be yourself. Just be you. Because when you're you, they're going to come. No matter whether it's in a retail business, multi-level marketing, in property, it doesn't matter. The principles are exactly the same. You will find your people if you're just real. But you've got to do the work. You've got to do the work, the inner work. And that's what I love, about your podcast for both of you. I know you both know these principles and you live those principles, and it's just so essential to do that inner work, because the business is us. The business is us.
Absolutely. From the inside out, we must do the work. Isn't that right, Melanie?
Absolutely. And you know what I love about this particular episode of this podcast is this. You have Brett humbly and powerfully saying, look, I have $400 million, but my first priority is to protect my family. I mean, we don't really come across a lot of those spaces where he really drives back the value, because again, he went from a breakdown to a breakthrough of having it all losing it all, and then coming back even stronger, but this time paired with the fact that his first priority is his family. It's his wife. I love the fact that after 26 years, you still have your date nights and you have your 2 30-minute conversations of tell me more. You're right. That's music to women's ears. I'm just saying, tell me more, right? And then children and the legacy building. And then, everybody's looking for this quick solution to long-lasting relationship, but it's always a work in progress. So as we come to a close, well, Brett, the one thing that I can promise you is we would love to bring you back to this podcast show, and this time with Marie, with both of you, if you would, and we would be honored to have both you and Marie on a future podcast episode very soon, as we probably go into the February, Valentine's Day, that it's celebrated worldwide. But we appreciate all the wisdom shares that you had for us this evening. You took us on a journey, and I think Janie and I are just smiling with what your brain's telling you is a lie about chocolate. Like, we need a t-shirt just for that. But Brett, any last pieces of advice, and tell us about your upcoming events that our listeners and viewers can certainly participate. Tell us about your coaching program. You mentioned that you were here in Orlando. We would love to come visit any of your future events that happens in the Orlando, Florida space. Count Janie and I in to be in the front row waving at you.
Thank you so much. Look, we've got events coming up in Los Angeles on the 18th. Mm-hmm. It's a 3-day event called the Code event, which is our beginning event to learn these skills that I've been talking about today. We're also holding that event in Orlando on the 25th, so a week later of January. And we've also got an online event, which is a free 21-day challenge event to learn a lot of these principles, to understand them and go deeper into them. And they can find that if they come to our website, which is www.relationshipwarrior.org. And they can link into our 21-day challenge online. And that's beginning on the 1st of January for a great start to the new year, Melody.
Perfect. Please do share us the link. We will make sure that when we advertise this podcast episode, those links are tied into our announcement. So to sum this up, Brett, if you were to look at this life now, not only from the 20-year-old, but from the 5-year-old span and your current youthful age, whatever age you're at right now.
Well, I'm 60 now, so, I've got 6 decades on the planet, so hopefully I've learned a few things by now.
The one wisdom share that you can tell children around the world, because we do have this cultural programming, right? And we're facing challenges and adversities as they grow up. And Janie and I are strong believers of planting legacy seeds early. We're both involved in our children's life in different capacities. And using our, going through a journey of personal development, we recognize the limitations that was put around us. And it's not our parents' fault, because they grew up with the same limitations set on them. So it becomes this generational practices, right? Totally. But your message to the youth that could be listening, or anything that the parents can then share to their children, to sum up your journey, right? So I'm going to take back not only a note to your 20-year-old self, but a note to your 5-year-old self. What would it be?
Yeah. It's to keep on learning and keep on growing. I mean, that's the nature of the divine in this universe. That's the nature of that force that wants us to be more, that we all want. We all want to be more, and we allow fear and other things to come in to stop us from doing that. So just do the work on yourself. Learn more about yourself. Learn more about whatever area that you want to excel and be great at. That's the advice.
Well, we certainly will take all of that advice, and we hope our viewers have just, and our listeners have just enjoyed and took notes. I know as you were talking, I was taking notes, doing the right thing, telling the truth, getting to know yourself and understanding your why, just such simple, but yet hard truths that we all need to hear and to be reminded of. It has just been such a pleasure and an honor to meet you, Brett. I can't wait till you come to Orlando. We will make sure that we are there supporting you. And as we continue this journey of life together, because as you said, it's all about relationships and it's all about growth. So we thank you for doing this episode in Life Unscripted. And until next time, I am Janie Lacey.
Melody Garcia and Brett all the way from Australia. We're very honored to have you and can't wait to have you and Marie back for our next episode in 2019.
Thank you, ladies, so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Goodbye, everyone.